So I wanted to create this tutorial on how to make vintage Valentine cards using my Blast from the Past baggies that are available in my Etsy shop, Journal for the Journey. So this is the content of one of the bags, and I'm just pulling everything out just to see what inspires me to create these vintage Valentine cards. We have old playing cards. We have bits and pieces. These are labels, vintage labels from seed packets that I was able to acquire from England that were never used by the label factory. These will come in handy, I think. I have some vintage magazine ads and stamps and old library cards. And you could see some old ribbon and matchbooks. So you're going to need white cardstock or white watercolor paper so that you can glue your vintage papers onto that. You're also going to need some matte gel. You can also use Mod Podge and a brush. Matte gel works really well. And a scissor. And then just start putting your pieces together that you think will go well for your Valentine's cards. So these are some of the selections that I've already made from my pack that I feel will go together. That's the mouse girl. I don't know about her. And some ribbon that I can attach. All right, now we're going to cut down the paper, and I decided that I want to make these cards fit into A2 envelopes that I had. So I'm going to use some 8.5 by 11 paper and cut them down to 4 by 5. I'm using my paper cutter because it's faster that way, but you can also use a scissor and a ruler to measure. So these are all 4 by 5 and they will fit nicely in A2 sized envelopes, giving some space for any embellishments that go over the card. This is the white cardstock that I was using from Michaels. And here I'm just separating some matte gel. I don't want to be working from my tub, so I use my, recycled plastic container lids that I keep in a stash in my studio. And that way, when I'm done with them, I can just throw them away. And I'll be using that to scoop. So you need some paper towels and then some water in a jar that you can clean your brush with. And now I'm going to use my label that I decided from my pack. That's going to be the focal point, and I'm just thinking about what else I'm going to put around it. Am I going to put some lace? Am I going to put some cards or ribbon? So, go through your pile and see what makes the most sense for your composition for your Valentine cards. Keeping in mind that we're going to keep this first one simple. So I decided that I don't want my card to be so white in the background, so I'm going to come up with an alternative, and I'm going to use the baggie that I have. So I'm going to just take my baggie apart. It's actually deli paper. This one was. You might have some pink baggies or blue in your pack, but you can open them up and use that. Or use vintage paper. That's included. But I'm going to cut down my baggie to the size of my card using either a pencil or a pen. And now I'm just going to cut it down, trim it down. And it doesn't have to be perfect because, we can cut the edges of these cards later. And now I'm going to attach the deli paper to the cardstock using some matte gel medium. I'm going to wet the paper first, just slightly, with water on the brush. And now I'm going to put some matte gel on the bottom. I feel like when the paper's wet, it tends to stick better. And then I'm just going to carefully place it before pushing down. And then I have old hotel cards that I keep around to squeegee, when I use the glue. And now I'm just finding the position for my label and the ribbon. I've decided I'm going to use this ribbon, so I'm going to cut this ribbon in a thinner manner to put it on the edge of my card. So when you have the ribbon to the size that you want, you're going to have to put enough matte gel that it's going to secure the ribbon or the fabric, because this is more like a fabric ribbon, down to your paper. So I'm adding a lot of matte gel because I want it to really stick to my paper. And now I'm positioning the label. So I want to use the gold edge that these cards have. I have another dog card, so I'm not too worried about this card getting damaged. I'm just going to cut the trim around. And then figure out, I can frame the flowers. That would look nice, but that would require cutting down the flowers, and I didn't want to do this in this case. So I am going to cut down the gold edge and create my own frame. I'm trying to see which way it would look better. And now I've decided that I'm going to add matte gel very carefully to the back of my vintage flower label. And I'm going to stick it in place on the front of my card, and very carefully with my hotel card that I use as a squeegee, attach it. And if it's still peeling off a little bit, just add a little bit more matte gel. Just be very careful when you're gluing these vintage papers down, because they can tear very easily. But we will take care of this problem in a second by protecting that card or that label. So I'm just resizing the edges, and I'm going to make them both the same length. So it's a little too long, so I think I'm going to cut it down just a little bit. And you want to make sure that both of the edges are the same length to kind of frame it. So that'll work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add the matte gel to the top of my card. The good thing about this matte gel, it's not glossy, it's just matte, and it will dry clear, but as I'm adding it to the top of my label, it will give the label some protection. Like I mentioned earlier, because it's a vintage piece of paper, it is very delicate, but now we're kind of sealing it with the matte gel. And it's tacky, so now my trim will attach to the top of the card. Now I'm going to continue using that dog card and using the hearts on the other side. And I've cut several hearts, and now I'm going to glue them to the ribbon. But you can look at your card that you're making and decide if you want to put hearts or whatever shape of cards is in your stack. This is just a simple little pizzazz to my card. And so the matte gel works really well on the paper, but the cards are a little bit thick, so you might need to add a little bit more matte gel if you're sticking the hearts or the shape of the cards onto the fabric, just so that you can get a good sticky, and so that when it dries and they're stuck together. So here I'm having to reapply more matte gel to make sure everything is stuck down. And if you have a little blow dryer, you can dry it to make it quicker. Now I'm just deciding what am I going to do about these edges. And what am I going to do to make this card a little bit more antique? So I have a Stabilo pencil. Stabilo pencils are great. You can use them for all sorts of things. Here I'm showing you what you could do with Stabilos. You can draw on something and then add water to it, and it gives it sort of a grungy or weathered look. You can also use distress ink from Tim Holtz. I'm probably going to use this on the edge of the card afterwards. So now I'm using my Stabilo and I'm running it around the edges of my card. I decided to zoom in, but I couldn't see what it was filming, so part of the card is cut off. I apologize for that. Now I'm taking some water in the brush and I'm running it along the Stabilo, and it's almost like a watercolor pencil, or it is kind of a watercolor pencil that you can use for different things, and it's blurring the edges, kind of giving it a grungier look. And I want to actually rub it into that white newsprint deli paper that I have to make it look a little bit older. So I'm just adding that and dabbing some water, and it's kind of like getting smeared all over to give the paper an older type feel. Now I'm blotting it because it got a little too wet, and I'm adding more Stabilo in the areas that I felt like it needed it. Being very careful that I don't start ripping the actual label. Now I'm adding some water. As you could see, it's like the fabric is soaking it up, and that's okay because I didn't want it to be like a clean Valentine. It's going to be more of like a grungier Valentine. Just looking at it and deciding where I need to add more darkness or more shading. And I think we're almost good with that. I decided to outline the hearts, even though the hearts were kind of wet still. So that became a little bit of a mess. And I ended up having to reapply the hearts once again with more glue. So now I'm going to start thinking about the edges. I want to do something about these edges, and I've decided that I wanted to scallop them. You could use a scallop scissor, but I used a regular scissor, and I'm just creating scallops with my scissor. Unfortunately, with the zoom, it cut off some of the scallops, but I hope you can tell what I'm doing. I'm trying to cut like a wave pattern, and I have that done. And now one of the last things I want to do is make it look even more antique. So I'm going to use my Tim Holtz Distress ink and using the sponge, kind of like just putting it on the edges to kind of grunge it up and give it more of that antique feel. And unfortunately it got cut off a little bit there, but I will show you the final result in a second. And so there is what the card looks like. I can leave it like that and write on the back, or I can attach it to another piece of cardstock. I'm just adding a little bit more matte gel to areas of the card that were now completely stuck, and that's it. So this is the final look of the card. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you try and create your own, please send me an image of what you create. I'd love to see it. Thanks, and thank you for watching.